For this year's Christmas episode, we will be returning to our Nautical Nightmares series to bring you 3 strange disappearances which occurred over the festive period. So, plug in your earphones, maybe grab yourself a glass of mulled wine and a mince pie, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Oh, and Merry Christmas. In our previous episodes, we have explored the inexplicable and tragic phenomenon of ghost ships, vessels which somehow attempt to complete their final, ill-fated journey long after they have disappeared beneath the waves. We have also examined some of the many mysteries associated with America's Great Lakes region, which appears to have claimed a high number of ships and souls throughout history. One vessel which would sadly go on to be categorised in both of these subject matters was a ship by the name of the Rouse Simmons. But to the people living in the vicinity of Lake Michigan, this craft will be forever known in far more affectionate terms as the Christmas Tree Ship. The Simmons was a 3-masted wooden schooner, owned and maintained by Captain Herman Schoenemann, who would traverse the lakes during the course of each year carrying a variety of goods. But as the festive season would approach, Captain Schoenemann aimed to generate the bulk of his yearly profits transporting a very particular type of product. Like many other ship's masters in the region, he would try to fit in as many trips as possible, transporting freshly cut evergreens from Michigan's Upper Peninsula to be sold on as Christmas trees in and around the city of Chicago. Over time, this enterprise became something of a family affair, with Herman's wife and daughter selling the trees direct from the ship when it arrived in the harbour, and his brother August going on to purchase his own ship in an effort to assist with the business. But the cruel storms which are infamous across the Great Lakes during the winter months are ruthless and unforgiving, and August's ship would break apart, with the loss of all aboard her during a trip which took place in November of 1898. Undeterred, Herman pressed on, continuing to donate a generous portion of his stock to local businesses and needy families, to the extent that he became widely known to the inhabitants of Chicago as Captain Santa. On November the 22nd, 1912, the Simmons was about to set sail from the port of Thompson when a sudden storm blew in. The weather was so poor that several of the men refused to sail aboard her, leaving Herman and just 17 of his crew to make the journey. With his ship heavily laden with over 15,000 Christmas trees, and as she battled against 30-foot waves, it soon became apparent to the captain that the gamble he had taken was not going to pay off. The Simmons was later sighted by volunteers crewing the Kewanee lifeboat station, fighting to make headway amidst a howling gale and with her distress flags on full display. But by the time a powered cutter had been found and had managed to make its way out into the storm, there was no sign of the beleaguered ship or her crew. 2 weeks later, on the 6th of December, Captain William Boxter was trying to guide his own vessel through a thick bank of fog when he heard the sound of a ship's bell directly ahead of him, coming out of the mist. Desperate to avoid a collision, the captain frantically took evasive action, only to find that there was no ship in his path. But as Boxter peered out into the fog surrounding his vessel, he caught sight of what appeared to be fresh evergreens, floating serenely across the lake's surface alongside his craft. Weeks later, several local youths were playing down by the lake shore when they came across a pair of Christmas trees in immaculate condition, having apparently washed ashore there. As the children gleefully moved in to salvage their find, they suddenly saw a shape off in the distance, moving in and out of the mist, resting on the surface of the lake. They would later describe the phantom vessel to their parents as having 3 masts and tattered sails, drifting listlessly along with the wind. Over the subsequent years, sightings of this mysterious ghost ship would persist, increasing in frequency as the festive period approached, with yet more Christmas trees continuing to wash up along the lake shore. The wreck of the Rouse Simmons would not be discovered for a further 50 years, when in 1971, a local diver discovered her sitting perfectly upright on the bottom of the lake, at a depth of 170 feet. She was virtually intact, her deck still lined with neatly piled stacks of Christmas trees, preserved by the freezing waters. And while she never fulfilled her final delivery to Chicago, her memory continues to be celebrated each and every year by the city and its people. Much as with the region of the Great Lakes, we have devoted several of our previous episodes to the disappearances of ships and aircraft which have occurred within the boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle. The inexplicable nature of many of the incidents which have taken place in this enigmatic region has ensured they are forever enshrined in maritime lore, including the disappearance of the USS Cyclops and the loss of Flight 19. But there have been many lesser known and equally baffling occurrences, one of which would take place during the Christmas period of 1948. On the evening of the 27th of December that year, a Douglas Dakota DC-3, designated call sign NC16002, touched down at San Juan's main airport, ending the first half of its regular return journey. As the aircraft's stewardess bade farewell to their passengers and prepared to take on those returning to the United States from their Christmas holidays, the other 2 crew members were liaising with the airport's engineers. Whilst the Puerto Rican mechanics found co-pilot Ernest Hill to be quite reasonable in their dealings with him, Captain Robert Lindquist would prove to be much more of a problematic character. Eager to take off and make his way back to Miami, Lindquist was dismissive of the ground crew's concerns when they discovered low levels of distilled water in the plane's batteries. It was only with the intervention of the airport's chief mechanic that Lindquist finally agreed to delay his departure, whilst the batteries were refilled. But he steadfastly refused to remain any longer in order to recharge them to full capacity, which he stated could be done by the aircraft itself whilst it was in flight. By way of a compromise, he did agree to circle the airport for a short period of time after takeoff prior to leaving the area, only for it to then be discovered that his radio was being affected by the lack of power. Having lifted off, the Dakota proceeded to circle the airport for a further 11 minutes, before breaking away and heading off across the Bahamas towards the Florida coastline. Whilst en route, the regular updates provided by Lindquist and Hill did not reveal anything untoward, but for some reason, they were not picked up by radio operators in Miami itself, but instead had to be relayed across to them from others situated in New Orleans. The weather was fine, and just after 4 AM on the morning of the 28th, as the airport ground crews in Florida went about their business, Lindquist radioed to say that he was 50 kilometers south of the facility and would be landing there within the next 20 minutes. Fully aware of the plane's limited battery and fuel reserves, when it had still not arrived by 0600 hours, the Miami control tower immediately raised the alarm with the local authorities. A rapid and wide-scale search of the region was conducted, which encompassed Cuba, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Florida Everglades, but no trace of the missing Dakota was anywhere to be found. With no wreckage or bodies from the missing aircraft having ever been discovered, it has only been possible to speculate as to what may have caused the disappearance of the 3 crew members and 28 passengers who vanished with her. It was largely theorised at the time that the aircraft must have suffered a massive power failure and crashed into the sea as it made its final approach to the airport. But the waters which lie off the coast in this region are both shallow and crystal clear, and the significant wreckage that would have resulted from such an impact was never discovered. Some believe that Lindquist and Hill may have missed a vital radio transmission concerning a change of wind direction, meaning they were much further off course than they believed themselves to be. But this theory is undermined by the fact that Captain Lindquist knew he was approaching from the south of the airfield. This was markedly different from his regular flight plan, meaning he was aware of the wind change and had compensated for it with the new path he had taken. The fact remains that so close to a populated area, almost within touching distance of its final destination, there should have been some evidence or witnesses as to the final fate of this unfortunate aircraft. The fact that there was not, and that the area it was lost in forms one of the points of the infamous Devil's Triangle, has inevitably led to fringe suggestions that the Dakota may have entered a time or dimensional vortex, or perhaps been intercepted by beings of an extraterrestrial origin. Sadly, despite being the most established and populated of the 3, the westernmost tip of the Bermuda Triangle also remains the most active in terms of disappearances. And 20 years on from the unexplained loss of flight NC-16002, the city of Miami would be the scene of an equally unexplained nautical mystery. On the evening of December the 22nd, 1967, a local businessman named Daniel Burak arrived in the city marina, in company with his friend, Father Patrick Horgan. Burak was a former hotel owner, and was well known amongst the other members of the marina. It was here that he stored his 23-foot-long cabin cruiser, which he had christened Witchcraft. A keen sailor, Burak had decided to spend that evening out on the water, cruising a short distance off the coastline so that Horgan could enjoy the Christmas lights which were on display there. At approximately 9 p.m, the local Coast Guard station received a radio transmission from the Witchcraft, stating that it had struck a submerged object and required their assistance. The operator who took Burak's call would later describe his tone as calm and confident, more of a request for assistance, if possible, rather than a conventional SOS call. Burak further informed the operator that he was not far from navigational buoy number 7, and that whatever he had hit had disabled his engine, but the boat itself was otherwise intact. With the Miami coastline always busy at this time of year, Coast Guard resources were already in operation out on the water, and so it took less than 20 minutes for the first rescue vessel to arrive at the scene. But the disabled motor cruiser they had expected to find was not present, and was also nowhere to be found following a wide search pattern within the vicinity of the navigational buoy. Throughout that evening and into the following morning, further and more extensive searches for the missing boat were conducted, but neither the craft nor any wreckage of it were located. Immediately, questions arose about the incident. What fate could have possibly befallen the boat and its occupants in such a busy area and in such a short space of time? Burak was notoriously safety conscious, having easily passed all the inspections which had been carried out on his boat. He had even gone so far as having the Witchcraft fitted with a special flotation device, which would keep it afloat even if part of it had become flooded. As was customary to the region, there had been a brief spell of bad weather that evening, and so it was theorised that this might have swept the 2 men and their craft further out to sea, away from the rescuers. But it was clear that apart from the engine and possibly the rudder, the rest of the cruiser and its electrical systems were still working at the time of the incident. Burak had neither transmitted any further radio messages nor fired any flares, which would have been expected had he found himself being dragged away from the rescue zone. In the years which followed, various conspiracy theories pertaining to Daniel Burak himself started to circulate, speculating that he had deliberately deceived the Coast Guard in relation to his predicament. Burak's previous hotel had mysteriously burned to the ground 4 years beforehand, and he had used the money he had made from selling the land it had been built upon to fund a new building. He had later gone on to sell all his interests in this new business, and for 18 months prior to his disappearance, he had effectively been living off the profits. Exactly 1 month after the loss of the Witchcraft, a property developer who lived near to Burak's home was robbed at gunpoint, and the offenders made off from the scene by boat. Some speculated that the hotelier had faked his own death, and then used the proceeds of the subsequent robbery to set up a new life far away from the area. But as intriguing as this story is, the disappearance of a Catholic priest along with the missing man somewhat undermines this theory. It seems unlikely that this holy man would desert his vows and flock to embark on a criminal career, or that Burak would have killed or abducted him in order to further cover his tracks. And so the question remains, what was the submerged object that the Witchcraft struck, and what did it do to his vessel in the short space of time before help could arrive on the scene? In each of the cases we have examined, it is of course possible to conceive rational and fact-based hypotheses for the conundrums they present. And yet, even after this, further questions still remain, difficult and nagging issues that serve to undermine even the most conventional of explanations. As we have seen time and time again, the sea is a mysterious and cruel mistress, one that is capable of effortlessly claiming human life and leaving little or no trace of the method she has used to do so. This festive episode is dedicated to all of the sailors and support workers who maintain the maritime links which bind us together. May they, and all of you, have a safe and very Merry Christmas.